afternoon, Michigan, and good morning, Brenda Brown out in Vegas. Before we get going today, I'm going to offer you a quick quote. And by the way, you're listening to Mike Hewitt on the Renegade River Show. I'm so fired up about this show, I'm getting myself ahead of myself again. Hey, a quick quote for you. I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society but the people themselves, and if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform them their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power, Thomas Jefferson. So somewhere during today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about education. Right now, we've got Jim Riley from Ion Muskegon in the studio with us.
Doesn't get any better than that.
Oh, boy. And on the telephone, we've got Scott Greenlee, former vice chair of the Michigan Republican Party. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, good morning, guys. How you doing?
Hi, Scott. Good morning.
Good. Scott, it's really nice to have you on. And what I'm hoping to get you to do today, speaking of education, is tell us a little bit from your vantage, especially given that you're a former vice chair for the state party. Tell us how what you saw at the convention.
Well, this particular convention was interesting. First, for those who have not participated and are listening in, each one of the political parties, major political parties in Michigan, held their state conventions this weekend with the purpose of electing inter-party officers, people who will work with the party to build the parties up and put them theoretically in a position to have wins in political contests for the November of 2014 elections, when we'll be electing a governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, and really all the other officers, because the state senate will be up this next cycle, the state house, education seats, court seats, and other local folks. So the Republican Party is the one, of course, I attended, given my conservative ways. And although I heard the Democrat Party in convention was quite interesting with a change of chairman, we did not have a change of chairman, though it was awfully close. Our current state chair, Bobby Shostak, won re-election, and I've heard a couple of different vote counts, and that is simply because there were people coming in and out of the meeting, and there were also the process of invoking unit rule across every one of the different congressional districts and voting areas so that it would be fair and it would be even. That said, I heard a raw vote total. He was reelected by about 30 votes, and a adjusted vote total when you employ the unit rule, taking it up a little higher to about 60 or 70 votes. So it was a very close election between he and his challenger, Todd Corser, who also had represented the Michigan Republican Party as a candidate for State Board of Education during the most recent election in November of 2012.
Hey, Scott, how many people attended the convention? Or let me ask differently, how many people took part in that vote that was that close?
It was about 1,950 voters. There were roughly 3,500 people at the convention. When you count those voters that are selected on a county-by-county basis in every one of Michigan's 83 counties, alternate delegates in case some of them are not able to attend for one reason or another, and obviously we had a lot of that with the weather challenges, and then, of course, media and guests that also attend these events.
Okay, and for listeners that have not been involved in conventions before, just to try to spell it out a little bit, the people that can vote or that are eligible, those are precinct delegates, is that correct?
The lion's share of those are precinct delegates. If there are not enough precinct delegates in a particular county that want to attend, other activists can be voted by the precinct delegates to go and represent the county. Okay, I would guess there were probably 85 to 90% precinct delegates and 10 to 15% activists that were selected to take part in this process.
Right, and just for listeners, just to bring them up, those are not familiar, to become a precinct delegate means I've been on the my local precinct ballot and I've won in an election. Is that true?
It's very very true, and it's one of the most important but little-known functions of our political process across all party lines. People who want to get interested should contact the local party of their preference and get the direct information on precinct delegate responsibilities for their area and find out how to get their name on the ballot and go in and vote for themselves. I've done that for many years as a precinct delegate. It's kind of fun to start up with president or governor and U.S. Senate, and eventually you get down to the place where you see your own name and you can vote for yourself.
First off, it is having done that a number of times myself, but I think the reason I really wanted to touch on who is a precinct delegate and what they do is for folks not involved in it, it seems to be like some third party monolith that, those people involved in the party are the smoke-filled back rooms and all that, when the truth of it is that the Republican Party or the other party is just a big, gigantic vessel for volunteers to take action.
You're absolutely correct. Any person that is registered to vote can become a precinct delegate and, as such, have a preference opportunity to attend one of these state conventions and vote on who their inter-party officers will be, as well as who their nominees will be for several publicly elected offices. The governor has to run, of course, in a primary situation where all citizens that are registered to vote in Michigan have an opportunity for a say. But the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, the secretary of state, and then all of the education seats, the State Board of Education, the University of Michigan Board of Regents, the Michigan State Trustees, and the Wayne State Board of Governors, along with Supreme Court candidates, are decided at party conventions in Michigan by those precinct delegates.
I think we lost him. Are you still with us, Scott?
Yes, sir. Yes,
okay.
sir.
Thought we lost you for a minute.
Oh, okay.
Hey, just on a slightly different topic, because I want to come back to this, but
yeah.
While you were talking, I was thinking about one of the things we hear a lot in the mainstream media, for just to use a cliche, is that the Republican Party needs to invent itself, or that it's troubled or sick, or whatever the words and the spin are that they use. And one of the ironies I find to that is twofold, maybe even threefold. But first, as I think the math goes, we've got 30 governors are Republican. We've got 27 state legislatures that are controlled by Republican majorities, and some huge amount of numbers of people that I would speculate voting in all of the different races in 2004, approaching 70 million people. That doesn't sound like a party that's in trouble. And then all of the reports, this is the first convention I haven't been to in a number of years, but all of the reports I'm getting back was that it was a really, really good convention in that it was bringing some healing to some of the divisions that have been affecting us for the last year or so. Was that your take on it, Scott?
It is. I don't think that there's any question that there are people who are very far to the right, very, very conservative, who feel that for the last few years the Republican Party has strayed a little far to the middle to their liking. So those folks have been embracing Tea Party groups, 912 groups, Liberty groups, all sorts of organizations that are essentially intended to activate more people and encourage more conservative type of leadership. I think that we're very fortunate that we elected good conservatives to lead this Republican Party in the state of Michigan, and a very diverse team to lead our Republican organization going forward for the 2014 cycle.
Right. Now, one of the things the media would like to convince us is that we nominate or put forward extremists, and that's why we lose. The irony to that is, as I mentioned, we've got a majority of state governments underneath our wing, if you will, by party majorities. But the other thing is, as I got to tell you, and I probably have a reputation for being a little bit conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And
I do too. It's something we're both afflicted with.
Oh yeah, and I got to tell you, the older I get, the more okay I am with that. But when I look at it, my politics tells me that we need to be able to have a contrasting difference, not sound like we're parroting what the Socialist Party, for lack of that's my view of them, but for what the Democrat Party is doing. And I'm not taking a shot at Romney, so please don't misunderstand my statement, but it felt like we were trying to be them light, and I think that caused a lot of people to stay home. So when I saw the party come forward after this convention with what I believe to be a better spread of ideology, meaning not just right-wing people or not just libertarian Republicans, but a pretty darn good spread, that made me feel a little bit more comfortable going forward.
Well, and being on the convention floor, I can tell you that that's the case not only in the leadership, but the leadership reflects the delegation that was there to elect them. We had as much diversity, and I'm not just talking race and creed and religion and things, but I'm talking political philosophy, as I've seen in a long time. And in many of the races, these folks all banded together on a single candidate. As you're aware, the state party chairman race was very, very close. Many of the other contested races, though, were not nearly as close, particularly in certain parts of the state, like West Michigan, where your, I guess, more conservative Tea Party 912 Liberty folks were banding together with what I'll call it more traditional Republican, or I hate to use the E word, but the establishment-type Republicans, and banding together to support candidates. In the youth chair race, for example, in the West Michigan area, the 2nd and the 3rd congressional districts, which are your area out in Grand Haven. I know you're in Grand Haven, Mike. Everyone who would live and be represented by Congressman Bill Huizenga over to the Kent County, Berry County, Ionia County, Calhoun County area, which is the 3rd district represented by Justin Amash. In the youth chair race alone, the combined vote of those two districts, if you will, was about 300 to 20.
Wow.
So one candidate got about 300 votes, another candidate got about 20 to 25 votes, and that was a large spread, but that was also a very diverse group of ideological people coming together and saying, you know what, we're going to work together and we're all going to support the same candidate because we think he's best suited to lead us through the future.
Now, one thing I like to hear about that is for the last year or two, it seems like the old adage that, you know, we eat our own had really started to, was so much infighting, and of course the media was gleeful, and I think I used the term with Jim Riley here a few weeks ago about Democrats frothing at the mouth, and he laughed, saying they're always frothing at the mouth. So, but for me, hearing this is really a bonus, because we really need to march forward out of this with some significant unity, rather than all of these little splinters with a bunch of people wanting to be islands and leaders of their own.
I couldn't agree more, Mike. We certainly had some spirited contests on Friday night at the district level when the districts were electing their officers, and parts of the state didn't provide necessarily the unity that West Michigan showed in some of their races. But I think that what people can take from this is that we can find common ground, and we should look for the best and brightest in each situation, and not particularly get ourselves into a situation where we're looking at a candidate for public or private office and saying, gee, we agree with that individual 97 out of 100 times, but it's those 3 times we don't that we're going to be upset with and we're going to focus on, and we're just going to say they're a rhino or they're a liberal or they're too conservative or whatever the issue happens to be, and we're not going to like them, when in truth we agree with them 97% of the time. I've told candidates for years, it's my experience, you will never find a candidate, if you look hard enough, that you agree with 100% of the time until you're the candidate. And even then, you'll sit up at night and lose sleep fighting with yourself over how to vote on a particular issue. So there's never going to be 100%. Let's find the best possible candidates that most of us agree with to put forward, band together, and work hard to move our government in a more conservative direction.
This is Jim Riley here, and I was at the convention, and a big issue for me has been and continues to be the inability of conservatives, Republicans in particular, to articulate why it makes sense to vote for candidates who espouse those kinds of values and programs and plans and economic theory. And a big concern that I heard from the folks here in Muskegon, because we've had a little bit of a takeover of our local party, and I think it's all for the for the plus. But those folks that are more conservative than Muskegon County has traditionally been is communication, and not just the ability to communicate with the public and with the local support, the Army, the frontline soldiers, if you will, but the interest in communication. And it's very clear to me, at least from sitting here in Muskegon County, that the current re-elected chairman of the state party either is not interested or doesn't have the skills to communicate to the districts and to the county parties. Now, you saw the video as I did, he made a big push there saying, hey, we are acknowledging that we are going to communicate and communicate better than we have in the past to you folks, the people who, in fact, do make up the party. Other than this very slick presentation, I know as a precinct delegate, as a county executive committee member, and as a delegate to the convention, I found the communications from Bobby Shostak, I cannot pronounce that last name, from Bobby to be very, very poor, as bad as any communication I've seen from anybody. I sign up for all the Democrat websites and emails and things of that sort, and they are excellent.
Sure.
What do you know? What have you seen that would lead you to tell me and maybe to comfort me that in fact for the last 2 years are going to be something in the trash heap, and we're going to see entirely different and more effective communication with the soldiers?
Well, I think that one of the things that Todd Corser and his supporters can take from this particular convention with a lot of pride is that vote count. I mean, the people have spoken, and they've said, you know, Chairman Shostak, with all due respect to the $28 to $32 million you raised and funded, and with all respect to the many victories, but also the few losses that we suffered on Election Day that were in the state of Michigan, you have to do a better job. And you've got to do a better job, particularly in two areas. One, communication. You hit the nail on the head. But communication links to the second thing, which is so critical in this day and age, and that is technology. We must include technology in every aspect of what we do as a party, and that includes communication, it includes voter identification, it includes voter surveying, it includes voter persuasion, every single bit of it. I think back to 1988 when I was a college student and started going to my first political events, and if we had had Twitter and Facebook and all of these things back in those days, I can only imagine what the Jack Kemp, Pat Robertson, George H.W. Bush fight would have been like. And in this day and age of 24/7 media, in this day and age, which, by the way, is very good, folks like you doing local shows, bringing in local perspective to provide more information, we have to be on the top of our game because people want transparency. They want to hear the accurate, not the spin. They want to hear it right from the horse's mouth. And I think that from a technological standpoint and a direct communication standpoint, that message was delivered loud and clear. And I know I will be encouraging it, as will many, many other people that supported and voted for the chairman.
Hey, Scott, listen, I got to tell you, we've got to go to a break, but I'm hoping you've got a minute to stay for just a little bit into the next segment because I've still got a couple questions for you.
Sounds good, Mike.
Okay, very good. We'll be back shortly, everybody. Welcome back. You're listening to Mike Hewitt on the Renegade River Show. Today we've got in the studio Jim Riley, who hosts the Eye on Muskegon, and we've got on
the Eye on Muskegon Show, the #1 rated political talk radio show on Sunday mornings by a left-handed conservative host.
Left-handed. And on the air with us is the former vice chair of the Michigan State Republican Party, Scott Greenlee. Scott, welcome back.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Hey, I'm
left-handed too, so I'm with you on that.
There we go. We just bumped our ratings up.
Yeah, and the worst part, I got to confess, is I'm left-handed also. I wonder if this is a conservative thing. So,
a confluence.
Scott, hey, I just want to take a little bit of a detour from where we're at, just for a brief minute. I use Facebook a lot to communicate positions, as you know. And along the path, though, I picked up on your Facebook page, you offered a little bit of a quip, said even though you're not running for a position, you were getting beat up on a little bit. So I wanted to ask you, what was that about, Scott?
That's a great question, and I think that there are a lot of, and again, in this day and age of media and email and blog postings and all these things, a lot of things that people will jump to a conclusion and assume and put out there. In my case, the individual, whoever attacked me, didn't sign their name. They just developed this website that said, or email address that said Kent County Truth Squad, and they emailed out to all the delegates that not only was I not a duly and legally elected precinct delegate, but that because I wasn't, and because I had a seat to a private political party convention as a voting delegate, that I should be essentially arrested on site, and people should contact Prosecutor Forsythe from Kent County and have him file the appropriate charges. This stems from the fact that, as you know, I've been in Grand Rapids as a resident 44 of my 45 years. I say Grand Rapids, Kentwood as well. But in the last year, I have a condo in Lansing, doing work in Lansing. The drive was getting really tough and what have you. So some people were challenging my residency, et cetera. And so it was kind of funny that they would attack me and say I shouldn't even have to vote at such a event when, first of all, we did not seat all precinct delegates. We had plenty of room, if I wasn't a precinct delegate, to still seat me as a voting delegate at this convention as one of the 10 or 15% that wouldn't have been. But secondly, I pulled up state statute, of course, immediately and set that around to the appropriate individuals, which directly from the Secretary of State's filing requirement 2013 precinct delegate cycle states qualification. An individual who wishes to seek a precinct delegate position must be a qualified and registered elector, residing within, as well as having his or her actual bona fide residence within the election precinct for which he or she desires to become a candidate on the filing deadline. And then there's the appropriate case law citing. Furthermore, precinct delegates do not lose their position once they are duly filed and elected, like a state representative or a state senator might if they moved outside of the bounds of their particular district. It's kind of the precinct delegate, and then the congressional people can live wherever they want.
You know,
a lot of people don't know that congressmen can live anywhere within the state that they represent.
Right.
So, for example, living in Lansing, I could run for a congressional seat in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and be completely within the bounds of the law.
You know, what surprised me about that issue is frankly, most legislators, or at least a fair measurable number on a state level, both state Senate and state House, take guys from the UP as an example. Almost all of them that I know have an apartment or share apartments, etc., in Lansing, because you get a month like January, you're driving back and forth from whether it's West Michigan or the UP or wherever. Why in the world would anyone want to risk their life and limb to drive in weather to cast? The whole idea was silly, but worse than that, and the reason I brought it up was it's not to echo it, so please don't misunderstand me, listeners, but it's that kind of divisiveness that we've really got to find a way to squelch.
You're right.
It's almost nonsensical.
I wish the individual who had, assuming it's a genuine question, is this legal and did Scott follow the rules? I wish they had just contacted me rather than sending out a blind email making a number of accusations, which essentially showed, one, they didn't know the statute, two, they hadn't researched the voter registration history, and three, and I'll say this somewhat snarkily, they forgot to use their spell check when they sent it out. A number of errors that cracked me and other people up. But regardless, I was a duly qualified elector at this convention, and I certainly exercised my right.
So well, first off, I'm glad to hear that. But going forward in terms of the party structure, kind of going back to where we left off. When you look forward to 2014, now that you've went through this convention, are you feeling comfortable about our possibilities in the coming election cycle?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic for a number of reasons. First, I think that this convention will help to make us a stronger and better political organization. I think the chairman will adjust things as anybody would after they've served a couple years in a role and they have more knowledge. And let's face it, Bobby Shostak's a very successful person. To accomplish the things he's accomplished in business tells you that he's intelligent, he's perceptive, he's able to negotiate, he's able to get things done. And like any leader, I think Bobby's looked at the last 2 years. He'll take assessment of it, and he'll find ways to be even a better and stronger state chairman and lead a better and stronger state party.
I agree with you. I got to tell you, to Jim Riley's point earlier about the word communication, people that have worked with me have heard me say this a lot, but at the bottom of every problem I've ever encountered, be it business or political, has been a lack of communication. And I suspect that such a narrow victory has got to have telegraphed a huge message to him. And I've met him a number of times, and you and I both know he's no dummy. He understood what was being telegraphed to him.
Well, there's no question. He is a smart guy. And by the way, as we assess the 2012 election and utilize that in large part to assess our chairman, I've got to take a position that Michigan was very successful. And when I do that, a lot of people say, well, wait a minute. We lost the presidency. Romney did not win in Michigan. We lost our Senate candidate. Pete Hoekstra was not elected. How can you call these massive losses successful? How can you say that we met with success? And I would remind people that that's true. We did lose those 2 seats, and we lost some education seats that are tied heavily to the top of the ticket. But in Michigan, we did very well with regard to ballot proposals. We did very well with the State House of Representatives and holding on to a strong majority in the State House. We did very well with the courts and retained a solid rule of law Supreme Court. And we had other gains at the local levels. And many states around Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio in particular, while they lost the top of the ticket, that went all the way down, and they weren't in a position like the Michigan Republicans were to return so many of our Republican members of Congress, which was another nice indicator of the firewall that was set. And again, if you look at anything in life, you can find negatives or positives. I think people who wanted to challenge Bobby, be it frustration for communication or whatever, looked at the record and said, well, we lost these top 2 seats. And people like myself who supported Bobby said, you know what? We raised more money than the party's ever raised. We spent it fairly effectively. And unlike many of our neighboring Midwest states, we returned an awful lot of people and held on to things that they simply lost in those other states.
It's got a question, not with the Republicans, but because it does essentially seem that the status quo is going to remain, which I think is generally a good thing. But it's very clear that the Democrats are terribly unhappy. They got rid of their longtime state leader, and they've got some new, very, very aggressive folks installed. And, of course, the unions have been making big noise. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that in talking to Democratic friends and people that I communicate with, I think that they are very frustrated. I think that they, more than the Republican Party, look at the most recent elections and ballot proposals as they had a losing cycle. They delivered the state for Obama, but that's been done for Democrats since 1988. They've won the state of Michigan for the presidential candidate. They won the U.S. Senate seat, but again, Stabenow's been elected and reelected now, and that's not a big surprise. Many sitting senators are not defeated. They took a look at the things I just referenced and said, wow, we really got our lunch handed to us. They were not happy with Proposal 2 and the fact that that gave the state legislature and the governor clearance to change the working atmosphere in the state of Michigan, and they are very much in a situation where they wanted to remove their chairman. They did that, and I'm sure they want to try many new things. What I think will work well for the Republican Party in 2014 is we traditionally do better in state government elected years where the governor's at the top of the ticket versus the president. And I also think this governor has made tremendous progress for the state of Michigan. And I'm showing my age. I'm 45. I was involved as a young person when Governor Engler was elected in 1990. It was a big surprise that he won. He was down in all the polls, wound up winning it. And after 2 years, there were all the recall Engler, Engler's terrible, this state's going in the wrong direction, et cetera, because Engler made very difficult, very tough decisions for the state like Rick Snyder has now made. Well, let me tell you, by year 3, in 1983, some stuff had started to turn, and people were seeing in Michigan that, hey, you know what, we do have more jobs. you know what, it is a little higher income right now. Things are getting fixed. And by year 4, he was very popular and reelected. I think we've got a governor that in year 3, people will really start to see some of the fruit from what he's done in the first couple of years, and I expect him to run in a very strong position, even though I know the unions will really go after him over the right to work issue.
Well, I know that. I just want to jump in here. I can tell you one group that's going to go after him, and it's not going to be the unions, and it's not going to be just the Democrats. It's going to be an awful lot of Republicans about all these taxes that he's talking about increasing.
Well, I think that in many situations, things have to be accomplished, things have to be done. And what will be interesting is at the end of the day to have the governor point out in very basic sense, are you really paying more taxes? Have cuts in one area removed a burden that in other areas you pay a little more? And the tax increases are always the ones that get highlighted, but the tax decreases are rarely done until political season. I think that people will see that by and large, we're in a much better tax situation, and because of that situation, we're able to employ a lot more people in the state of Michigan than we've been able to do in the past, particularly in the last 10 years.
My concern with that, Scott, is that it reminds me a little bit of being a candidate once upon a time myself trying to run on Michigan fair tax. And I say that because, first off, I remain a Michigan fair taxer, but it was a very, very difficult concept to communicate. So when I look at Governor Snyder, on one hand, as a very conservative fellow, he's surprised me. I'm the conservative fellow, not him. But when I set aside what I thought he was going to be and look at what he's actually achieved, I applaud what he's been doing for the most part. Now, some of us may argue it was the legislature dragging him along, but that doesn't necessarily matter. The end result is what he's been able to achieve. But when he's pressed at some point in the coming election to try to articulate his way through this convoluted, was it really a tax increase because we've got lower here and upper, that's going to be a tough sell. That's my concern.
I think it's incumbent upon him, and he's one of the smartest guys I've ever sat and talked with in any walk of life, as well as his advisors and party activists, to get the initial information in a manner in which people can understand it in a pretty quick glance, since we live in a soundbite society, and make the gains in Michigan under Governor Snyder very, very clear. And I think that will be done. I'm very confident the governor will come out with the appropriate messaging. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure the Democrats will run against him, but I think that the choice will be clear that Michigan's now moving in the right direction. Under Democratic leadership, the previous 8 years, Michigan was moving in a very, very bad direction. And if we want to keep moving Michigan ahead, if we want to create more jobs, if we want to create overall a safer and better state that for the first time in many, many years saw an increase in residency over the last year, and I expect that to continue, we'll keep Governor Snyder on the job.
You're probably right with that. And one of the other things that offers a little bit of wind in those sails is we started out in this show today talking about party politics, and it feels like most of the divisiveness, and you mentioned a couple isolated circumstances, but it feels like a lot of the divisiveness is starting to I don't want to say subside, but it's starting to get to the point where it's manifesting itself in a more professional and business fashion. And I think what that will do is it will give us a greater turnout, because I think it squelched turnout in the 2012 election cycle. I think there was so much rancor that it, in the end, the numbers were down. We may like the percentages, but not the numbers. So if we can come forward with this from this convention with some unity, and that feels like the direction we're generally going in, I think that can be nothing but plus for the state in total.
I agree with you. There's no question it would be a plus for the state. And I know that there's a lot of talk about unity and a lot of talk about working together now. I think you'll see Chairman Shostak and Governor Snyder internally with the Republican Party embracing that agenda and really trying to work with every person who represents any view in the Republican Party. There will always be folks that aren't happy with the way something is done, but if we can get people understanding that Michigan is moving forward and that no matter what, you're never going to have a utopia or a perfect situation, I think that will not only accomplish a lot in the next 2 years for the state and for the party, but for the next 4 years with a re-elected Governor Snyder, a stronger State House and State Senate behind him, and hopefully maybe even increasing our margins in the U.S. Congress. And certainly we have a U.S. Senate race in 2014 that a lot of people are keeping an eye on with regard to what Senator Levin's going to do, in addition to returning a fantastic Attorney General in Bill Schuette and our Secretary of State.
No question about it. Scott, we're going to head towards a break, and listen, I know I kept you over an extra segment, so I want to thank you very, very much for coming on the Renegade River Show today.
Always a pleasure to chat with you guys. Continued success.
Very good. Thank you very much, Scott.
Have a great one.
Welcome back. You're listening to Mike Hewitt on the Renegade River Show. And for the rest of the little bit of time we got left, I think Mr. Jim Riley and I are going to kick around a little bit of talk about some education if we don't mess up. Welcome back, Jim.
Well, it's great to be back here after 2 minutes.
But just for the listeners, before the show started today, Jim and I got talking a little bit about education, and he was kind of focused on higher education, and I'm a little bit, my ideology forces me to look at K through 12, but I think we both share some concerns. So, Jim, what's your concerns?
Well, I have my biggest concern, and actually it's not really focused on higher education, because at some point people will understand, because they have to come up with their own money. They'll have to come to grips with whether it's worth their money or not to invest in college. And, of course, we're finding out that places like Baker College and Muskegon Community College are seeing a significant increase in attendance and people interested in learning there, because they see it as a better value than some of the bigger, more theoretically more prestigious universities. And I wouldn't be at all surprised that businesses in general are starting to look at young people and saying, here's somebody who went to, let's say, my alma mater, Michigan State, and they spent 6 years, because that's what they've been advised to do, getting a degree in communications, which is essentially a worthless degree. And here's somebody who went to a theoretically less prestigious college, like maybe Baker College, worked part-time, got their degree in a relatively short period of time. They don't have near the debt, and they might say, that's to me, as an employer looking to hire somebody who's got not just intelligence and education, but somebody who's got good judgment. Maybe I'm not just going to go knee-jerk and say that U of M grad or that Michigan State grad is the preferred one. I like the guy the guy or the woman who in fact used some logic and picked a Baker College or an MCC.
You and I agree there. My issue is if you take, and I know I've talked about this on the air before, so listeners that have been here and heard this, I apologize for the retread. But when I look at young folks that have went through K through 12 and they leave with no marketable skills whatsoever, and I try to drill in a little bit and say, how did that happen? So I looked at the curriculum, and the curriculum is 75% plus or minus college prep, when we know that 25% of the high school graduates will go on to college. And you think, well, why are they doing that then? They're not getting any of the basics. They're getting this rounded education. And I always joke, I say the rounded education, the hole in the middle used to be where the actual education was. And so they're leaving, and then me as an employer most of my life, when I'm looking to say, who am I going to hire? I want to get an entry-level person and grow them in my industry. I'm finding that before I can do that, I have to teach them to learn before I can teach them, because up until that point, they've been taught to only memorize test results for Friday's test because it's tied to government funding, but that they don't actually have to associate and understand and be able to assimilate it and move on. They're not being taught how to learn things.
Well, I think this whole testing thing is garbage, but from an entirely different view. I know when I grew up, and I got an excellent education in my grammar school and junior high and high school, and we had tests every year. They called them achievement tests. They were big deals, and the teachers, in fact, taught to teach you the education that was necessary to do well on the achievement tests. I don't believe that the tests today are significantly different. What I see a problem is, and maybe it can be boiled down to just one little term, and that is social promotion. Problem is, and I don't know the exact years that you learn this, but let's just say in third grade you learn subtraction. And if you don't learn subtraction in third grade and they socially promote you to fourth grade, you're never going to be able to learn division. And the same thing when it comes to spelling or the basic levels of writing, and they socially promote you out, and you have absolutely no hope of moving on beyond that because you don't even have the basic skills. This is an education, as far as I'm concerned, it's a scam. Every teacher in every school system in the country knows what's going on. Now, have you ever seen teachers go out and protest in front of the school that we are socially promoting kids into guaranteed failure? No, you've seen them when they want raises. You've seen them when they're asked to pay a tiny percentage for their insurance and things of that sort. You do not see them get out and raise holy heck when it concerns the welfare of the children in their classes. So sorry, folks, I question their sincerity.
I got to tell you, I think first off, it's hard not to agree with you, but except for this.
Of course, it's hard not to disagree with.
Wait, you didn't hear that part. But except for this.
Oh, I didn't hear that either. No, I did not.
Here's the problem as I see it. I think that we'll use Hollywood as an example. I think there are a portion of people in Hollywood that are conservative or that are even moderate. They're not all leftist, extreme leftist Fruit Loops.
That's true.
And so, but the other folks are only on a rare basis. Like Clint Eastwood, he's multimillionaire. He's made everything in his life. Now he's feeling comfortable enough to make political statements. And I use that as an example because I think that there are some teachers within our school systems that recognize the problem, and frankly, I think a lot of them have a fear of being ostracized within their environment, and so they are forced to, by political correctness, to keep their mouth shut. But then I got to tell you, on the other side of this key of education is that us parents we've got to at some point stop saying it's the school's fault and start saying, wait a minute, this is a little bit of a double-edged thing going on. Yes, the schools and their curriculum and MEA and all of the things that we could agree on and disagree with, but in the end, the school wasn't designed to be a babysitting program. And so just dumping kids off, or when the kids get home saying, there's a refrigerator, there's your computer game, there's the TV, and I'll see you at 7 o'clock tonight. It takes parents to raise children. So there's two tracks to this train going down.
I find that interesting because they don't teach this anymore. But there was an event, it was got everybody's attention back some time ago. I think they called it World War II, and it was a real big event back then. I know it's not. They probably don't even teach anything about it today. But during that big event, lots and lots of fathers and lots of mothers were away from the home. And you know what? This big event that they don't teach anything about any longer, a lot of those fathers didn't come home ever. An awful lot of those fathers, hundreds of thousands of those fathers didn't come home. The mothers were off working in the plants. The family was not home. Now, I will agree that the family and things were different then, but the reality that you've got to have Ozzie and Harriet household to provide the fodder for the teachers to do well. One thing that's always bothered the heck out of me is that the schools keep telling us, not that the teachers are complaining, or the parents are teaching about the parents are complaining about teachers. It is the teacher saying, we cannot teach these children because these kids are all screwed up. Okay, that may be true. As a matter of fact, I buy what they say. The teachers' unions, and almost every teacher says it's not our fault. It's the kids that are being sent to us are the reason we're failing. That being the case, why do they then scream bloody murder when the parents say, okay, if you've agreed that you cannot teach our children, I'll buy that. Let me take my child to a place, be it a charter school or any other school, where they don't say say they cannot teach you. And the teachers scream bloody murder. No, you can't do that. On one hand, they tell us we can't teach your kids because your kids are all screwed up. On the other hand, they say you can't take your kids to some place where they will at least try and in too many cases succeed to educate them.
Yeah, but it's not just teachers, though, too. I mean,
the administrators. It's all the people who get the money.
Through.
The kids have got a $12,000 check attached to each one.
Right.
That's what's important. They have pizza days on count day. Come on.
Snowflake day.
Well, even in high school, though, they take the courses that get them through. They aren't encouraged to take the courses that can teach them something that they want to go forward to, like electronics or wood shop or whatever.
Yes,
they take what gets them through.
Michigan State University, this is about 15 years ago, and I have no reason to believe it's any different today, had 30 classes of freshman English where English was the first language. In other words, not Spanish kids or Mexican kids that came over that had a problem. These are young adults. These are 18. So they're full adults who were accepted to Michigan State University, and I know University of Michigan probably had a similar situation, that didn't even have the basic skills out of high school to succeed at Michigan State. So they created 30 classes. What are these people doing? What are these young adults even doing at a university? We used to have adult ed. Now we're letting people that have not even the basic skills go into college. Something's wrong.
Like anything else in society, follow the money. Okay?
Oh, baby, you hit the big one right there.
It's always going to be about follow the money.
Every kid's got $12,000 check attached to them.
And the irony, for me at least politically, is that a lot of the folks that make up the faculties of these, especially higher education, listen, not all of them. There's some conservatives or some libertarians, but a lion's share of them are very left socialist by definition. I'm not saying that as a slur. That's the politics of the definition, the word definition of the politics that they espouse. The irony to it is that they're very, very interested in money. And I thought, wait a minute now, I thought you wanted to have everyone equal and all that, and suddenly you want to make a lot more.
I think there's a wonderful book called Animal Farm where the pigs who had ultimately taken over said, yes, we firmly believe and support the concept that everyone is equal. It's just some people are more equal than others.
Yeah, I'm reading from the Huffington Post. Never thought I'd be quoting the Huffington Post at the end of my show, but it says Detroit's population fell by 25% in the last decade. What it's referring to is that nearly, and I'm quoting, nearly half of Detroit's adults are functionally illiterate. And so this is the same body that's really aggressively against school vouchers, aggressively against charter schools, aggressively against anything other than this system that's clearly in free fall failure.
Did you see anybody from the educational establishment or anybody from the Democrat Party standing tall, or frankly, even the Republican Party, standing tall for the students and the parents of the Muskegon Heights school system when 3 years ago, which was 2 full years before the system totally collapsed, when it was ranked the worst high school in the state of Michigan, a state that has the cities of Detroit and Flint in it? Not one person. There were no protests out there. There was nobody out there saying, we're not educating these children.
Incredible.
I'd say it's pretty incredible.
Absolutely incredible. Listen, if you listeners, if you got interest, if you want to post questions for the next show, you can find the Renegade River Show on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook. Send me an invite or like the Renegade River Show. As we go forward, if we can collect up some questions, it would be a great thing. I look forward to talking to everybody next Sunday. Have a great week.